The scanner ranked every species, then displayed hers alone, unclassified apex. The day the scanner was activated, the Grand Forum station felt heavier than usual, as if the metal walls themselves were holding their breath. Delegates from hundreds of species filled the vast chamber, their shapes and colors forming a living map of the known galaxy. Some floated in gentle spheres of light. Others stood on jointed legs or rested within life support frames. Every species had come for the same reason. Today, the galaxy would be ranked. For generations, the cognitive and adaptive species scanner had existed only as a theory. It was designed to measure intelligence, creativity, emotional depth, adaptability, cooperation, and long-term survival potential. Not weapons. Not physical strength. It was meant to answer a single question the galaxy had argued about for centuries: which species was truly the most advanced? The scanner itself stood at the center of the chamber, rising like a quiet monument. Its surface shifted softly, covered in symbols that changed faster than most eyes could follow. It did not look powerful. It looked patient. When the High Archivist called the session to order, the room fell into silence. One by one, species were scanned. Ancient civilizations with million-year histories received high rankings. Artificial collectives scored perfectly in logic and efficiency. Long-lived philosophers gained praise for stability and wisdom. Each result was met with polite reactions, quiet pride, or mild disappointment. Nothing unexpected happened. Then it was humanity's turn. The human delegation was small. Compared to many others, they looked fragile, short lifespans, soft bodies, limited senses. Their technology was impressive for their age, but no one expected surprises. Humans themselves did not seem tense. If anything, they looked curious. Among them was a woman named Alara Voss. She was not important, not officially at least. She was a systems analyst, invited as a technical observer because she helped maintain translation software used by the forum. She had not prepared a speech. She did not expect to be noticed. Alara stood with her hands folded, listening as the scanner activated. Light moved across the human group, data poured in, symbols changed, numbers began to form, then the scanner slowed. A pause like this was rare. At first, the audience assumed it was a delay. The system was complex. Humans were new, adjustments took time. But the pause stretched longer than comfort allowed. The numbers vanished. The lights dimmed slightly. Then the screen cleared completely. Every species name disappeared. In their place, a single image appeared: Alara Voss. Her face filled the display, captured from the moment she glanced upward in confusion. Beneath her image, two words formed, written in the universal standard: Unclassified Apex. The chamber erupted, not in shouting but in sound. Gasps, clicks, rapid communication signals. Emotional flares from empathic species rippled across the room. Alara took a step back. She looked around, searching for someone to explain what was happening. Her heart began to race. She had not agreed to this. She had not done anything. The High Archivist raised several limbs for silence, though even they looked uncertain. This result, the Archivist said carefully, has no precedent. Scientists rushed forward, their displays flickering with frantic analysis. The scanner had never refused classification before. It always placed species within known ranges. Even anomalies fit somewhere. This did not fit. Alara felt suddenly exposed. She was aware of 1,000 eyes studying her, not with hostility but with intense curiosity. She resisted the urge to hide. "I think there's a mistake," she said quietly, her voice amplified across the chamber. "I'm not special." That statement only deepened the confusion. The scanner did not change. Experts began questioning the data. They asked about human biology, psychology, history. Alara answered when asked, choosing simple words. She explained that humans were not the strongest or the smartest. They made mistakes constantly. Their history was full of failures. She did not say this with shame. She said it like a fact. As more information was processed, patterns began to emerge. The scanner had not identified her as superior. It had identified something in the human data that refused to stabilize. Every time the system tried to lock humanity into a category, the variables changed. Humans did not optimize for one trait. They adapted. Alara explained how humans prepared for things to go wrong, how they built backups for backups, how they expected systems to fail and trained themselves to respond, not panic. "We don't assume things will work," she said. "We assume they won't. Then we plan from there." The chamber grew quiet again, this time with a different kind of attention. The scanner had been designed to measure performance under defined conditions, but humans were shaped by uncertainty. They changed behavior based on emotion, context, and experience faster than predicted. They learned not just from success, but from loss. The image on the screen did not change. Unclassified Apex remained. Alara finally understood what frightened her the most. The scanner had chosen her not because she was exceptional. It chose her because she was average. If she represented humanity, then the result applied to all of them. The archivist ended the session early. Too many questions remained unanswered. As delegates slowly left the chamber, quiet conversations filled the air. No one celebrated. No one protested. They were unsettled. Alara walked out last, her thoughts heavy. She did not feel powerful. She felt small. Behind her, the scanner dimmed, but it did not shut down. It continued observing. And for the first time in its long existence, it did not try to rank what it saw. The grand forum station did not sleep after the session ended. Lights stayed bright in the research wings, and data streams ran non-stop through secure channels. What had happened in the chamber could not be ignored, delayed, or quietly forgotten. The scanner's result had already spread across the galaxy. Unclassified Apex. No one agreed on what it meant, but everyone agreed it mattered. Alara Voss did not return to her quarters. She was escorted, politely but firmly, to a neutral analysis room near the core of the station. The room was simple, designed to be comfortable for many species. Soft lighting adjusted automatically. The air temperature shifted when she entered. She sat at a plain table, her hands resting on the surface, trying to steady her breathing. She had faced complex systems failures before, cascading errors that could shut down entire networks. This felt worse. Systems could be fixed. This felt personal, even though she knew it was not meant to be. A group of scientists entered, representing different species. They did not crowd her. They spread out, maintaining respectful distance. None of them looked angry. Most looked confused. A few looked fascinated. One of them spoke through a translator field. "Alara Voss, thank you for your cooperation. We want to understand the result. We believe you can help." She nodded slowly. "I'll answer what I can." They began with simple questions: her age, her profession, her education. Nothing unusual appeared. She was exactly what she claimed to be, an ordinary human with an ordinary background. Then the questions shifted. How do humans define success? Alara thought for a moment. That depends on the person or the situation. Sometimes success is winning. Sometimes it's surviving. Sometimes it's learning what not to do next time. Several scientists exchanged quiet signals. Another asked, "How do humans respond when long-term plans fail?" She gave a small, tired smile. "We make new plans or smaller ones. Or we try again differently. Failure isn't the end. It's part of the process." Data panels lit up around the room as the scanner's logs were replayed. The system had not flagged her intelligence, strength, or authority. It had flagged behavioral flexibility under unpredictable conditions. The scientists had expected apex species to show dominance, efficiency, or control. Humans showed something else. They showed adjustment. While the discussion continued, Alara's words were sent to research teams across the station. Linguists, sociologists, and systems theorists worked together, replaying human history at accelerated speeds. Wars were noted but not emphasized. What caught attention were recoveries. Rebuilding after collapse, cooperation after division, innovation born from lack. Humans did not progress in straight lines. They zigzagged. The scanner, designed to model future potential, kept encountering branching paths that multiplied instead of narrowing. Every failure created more possible outcomes, not fewer. This confused prediction models. Back in the room, a senior analyst finally asked the question many had avoided. Why did the scanner isolate you specifically? Alara swallowed. I think, because I didn't stand out. Silence followed. She continued, choosing her words carefully. I wasn't leading, I wasn't speaking, I wasn't trying to influence anything. I was just observing, reacting. That's what I do at work too. I watch systems behave under stress. I don't force them, I adapt to them. That answer sent another wave of data through the station. If the scanner had chosen a human leader, the result could be dismissed as charisma or authority. If it had chosen a scientist, intelligence could be blamed. But it chose an average observer. That made the result harder to contain. Elsewhere, the Galactic Council convened an emergency discussion. Some members were uneasy, others were curious. A few were quietly afraid. The term apex had always been associated with hierarchy, with dominance. Humans did not act like dominators. That made them unpredictable. To gain clarity, the Council approved a controlled evaluation, not a competition, not a test of strength, a series of simulations designed to observe responses to uncertainty. Alara was informed she would participate. She agreed, though her stomach tightened. She reminded herself this was just data, systems, variables. She understood those. The simulation chamber was unlike anything she had seen. It was a shared virtual environment, able to adapt instantly. Other representatives joined her, beings known for logic, for planning, for stability. Each participant was given the same limited information. The scenario began calmly. A supply network failure in a distant colony. Resources were limited, timelines were unclear. Most participants immediately optimized. They calculated best outcomes based on existing data. They committed to plans with confidence. Alara did not. She asked questions. What if the data is wrong? She said aloud. What if the failure isn't where we think it is? Some participants ignored her. Their plans were efficient, clean, elegant. Then the simulation changed. New variables appeared. Communication delays, resource contamination. Assumptions failed. Some participants froze, waiting for updated data. Others attempted to force original plans, losing efficiency rapidly. Alara adjusted. She abandoned her initial assumptions without regret. She broke the problem into smaller pieces. She accepted partial success instead of total control. She even allowed failure in one area to stabilize another. The observers noticed something important. She did not panic. She did not rush. She adapted in real time. The simulation ended with no clear winner. But one result stood out. Alara's approach left the system more stable than when it began. It was not optimized. It was resilient. Afterward, she was asked how she knew what to do. She shrugged. I didn't. I just kept moving. That answer appeared again and again in human data. Humans did not wait for certainty. They acted without it. As more simulations followed, the pattern held. Humans did not dominate scenarios. They endured them. They bent without breaking. They adjusted expectations instead of resisting reality. The scanner's classification algorithms were reviewed. It became clear the system equated apex with peak performance under ideal conditions. Humans rarely operated under ideal conditions. They thrived in broken ones. Late in the cycle, Alara was finally allowed to rest. She sat alone in a quiet observation deck staring out at the stars. She did not feel proud. She felt exposed. She thought about home, about human history, about how often her species had failed, and how often they had continued anyway. Behind the walls, the scanner ran new projections. Each one ended the same way. Humanity could not be placed at the top, because humanity refused to stay still long enough to be measured. The words remained unchanged. Unclassified apex. And for the first time, the galaxy began to suspect that the most dangerous thing about humans was not what they were now, but what they became next. By the time the third cycle began, the Grand Forum Station had changed its tone. The open curiosity of the first day and the confusion of the second had settled into something deeper. A quiet seriousness filled the halls. The galaxy was no longer just observing humanity. It was studying them. Alara Voss felt it in the way people looked at her now. Not with fear, not with admiration, with focus. She walked through corridors where conversations paused when she passed, not because she was important but because she represented a question no one could yet answer. She did not enjoy the attention. She reminded herself to breathe, to walk normally, to stay grounded. The council announced the next phase of evaluation. It would not be theoretical. It would not be abstract simulations with clear rules. Instead, it would involve shared problem spaces, complex shifting environments designed to resemble real galactic challenges. No single solution, no clear success condition. The purpose was simple: to see how species behaved when nothing made sense. Alara was placed into a mixed group with representatives from several advanced civilizations. They were polite. Some were distant. Others were openly curious about her. One asked directly, through a soft translation field, "Do you know why your kind unsettles the scanner?" Alara considered the question. "Because we don't settle," she said. "We keep changing." The environment activated around them. They found themselves in a vast artificial habitat designed to simulate a failing multi-species settlement. Infrastructure was unstable. Energy sources fluctuated. Communication systems were unreliable. The rules changed without warning. At first, everyone did what they knew best. One species focused on restoring order, attempting to bring the system back to its original state. Another optimized energy flow with perfect efficiency, assuming stability would follow. A third prioritized communication clarity, refusing to act until all data streams aligned. Alara watched. She did not rush forward. She walked the space, observing how systems interacted. She touched walls, examined energy readouts, listened to distorted signals. She was not searching for a perfect fix. She was searching for patterns. Soon, parts of the environment failed completely. Some participants became frustrated. Their methods relied on predictability. When predictability vanished, they hesitated. Alara did not. She began rerouting small systems, not to restore them fully, but to keep them functioning just enough. She allowed inefficiencies. She accepted losses. She worked with what remained instead of mourning what was gone. An observer noted something unusual. Alara smiled, not because she was winning, because she was learning. She communicated openly, sharing partial information instead of waiting for certainty. "This might not work," she said often, "but it could help for now." Some participants resisted this approach. They preferred clean solutions. Others slowly adapted, adjusting their expectations. Cooperation began to form around flexibility rather than control. The environment stabilized, not perfectly, but enough to continue. When the simulation ended, the council reviewed the data. The result was the same as before: no domination, no collapse, resilience. During the debrief, a council member asked Alara why humans accepted imperfection so easily. She answered honestly: "Because perfection never lasts. We build for tomorrow knowing it will break. That doesn't make it useless, it makes it temporary." That concept echoed through analysis chambers. Temporary solutions. The galaxy had always sought permanence. Humans expected change. As evaluations continued, something unexpected happened. Other species began copying human behavior, not consciously but instinctively. They stopped insisting on perfect data. They experimented. They allowed small failures to prevent larger ones. Performance improved across the board. This worried some analysts. If humans influenced systems simply by participating, what would happen when they led? Alara noticed the shift too. She saw others watching her not as a subject but as a reference point. She did not correct them. She did not encourage them either. She continued doing what felt natural. One cycle, a simulation introduced a moral dilemma. Resources could be allocated efficiently, but doing so would abandon a minority population. The mathematically correct solution was clear. Alara hesitated. She chose a slower path that preserved the minority but reduced overall efficiency. When asked why, she answered quietly, because tomorrow's system depends on who's still here. The scanner recorded a spike in long-term survival probability. Not immediate success, long-term continuation. This result caused debate. Some council members argued that humans allowed emotion to override logic. Others countered that emotion informed logic in ways their models did not account for. The scanner remained silent. It did not correct itself. It did not update the classification. Unclassified apex stayed on record. Outside the simulations, the galaxy reacted. Media networks discussed humanity endlessly. Some portrayed them as dangerous variables. Others saw hope. A few species began requesting human consultants, not for strategy but for crisis response. Alara declined most requests. She was tired. She missed being invisible. One evening, she stood again at an observation window, watching distant stars drift slowly. She thought about how small humans were in the grand scale of things, how easily they could be erased by forces beyond their control, and yet they persisted. A scientist joined her quietly. "The scanner still cannot place you," they said. "It tries, it fails. Your species keeps exceeding projected adaptation curves." Alara nodded. "That sounds right. Does that not frighten you?" She thought about it. "Sometimes, but fear is familiar. We grew up with it." The scientist considered this. "You treat uncertainty as a companion." Alara smiled faintly. "We don't have a choice." As the cycle ended, the council prepared for the final phase. A decision would be required. Humanity could not remain undefined forever. The galaxy needed categories, but categories required stability. And humans refused to be stable. The scanner processed its final models late into the artificial night. Each projection ended with branching futures too complex to collapse into a single outcome. For the first time, the system flagged a limitation in its own design. It was built to measure what was, not what could become. Alara returned to her quarters exhausted but calm. She did not know what the galaxy would decide. She only knew one thing. Humans would adapt to it. They always did. And somewhere deep within the station, the scanner continued to observe, no longer searching for a rank, but for understanding. The fourth cycle began with a kind of tension the Grand Forum Station had never experienced before. It was not fear, and it was not excitement. It was uncertainty, shared by everyone at once. The council chambers were full from the first hour. Delegates arrived early, carrying reports, projections, and questions that had no clear answers. Humanity could no longer be treated as a curiosity. They had become a problem. Not because they were hostile, not because they were demanding power, but because the systems built to understand the galaxy could not contain them. The scanner had reached the edge of its design, and beyond that edge was humanity. Alara Voss sat quietly at the back of the chamber. She had not asked to be there, but the council insisted. She was not placed on a platform or under a light. She was given a simple seat like any other observer. That was how she preferred it. The debate began carefully. One council member spoke about tradition. For thousands of cycles, the ranking system had provided stability. Species understood their strengths and limits. Alliances formed naturally. Conflicts were avoided because expectations were clear. An unclassified species disrupts balance. the member said. Not through aggression, but through uncertainty. Another member disagreed. The balance was built on incomplete understanding. Humans did not break the system. They revealed its limits. That idea echoed through the chamber. Ilara listened, her hands folded, her eyes lowered. She did not feel like a representative of humanity. She felt like herself, tired, thoughtful, small in a very large room. Data displays activated around the chamber, showing projections of possible futures. In some, humans integrated slowly, offering assistance during crises. In others, their adaptability caused rapid technological and cultural shifts. None of the models showed humanity seeking domination. That confused many delegates. Why would an apex species not claim authority? One asked. A cultural analyst responded, because humans do not see survival as a zero-sum outcome. Their history shows repeated cooperation even after conflict. The word apex came up again and again. For most species, it meant finality, a peak that could not be surpassed. For humans, the data suggested something different, a process. The council called Ilara forward not to testify but to answer a single question. What does apex mean to humans? Ilara stood slowly. She did not rush. She did not prepare a speech. I don't think we use that word the same way, she said. To us, being at the top doesn't matter much. Things change too fast. What matters is not ending. The chamber was quiet. She continued. We don't aim to be finished. We aim to keep going. Some delegates found that idea unsettling. Others found it strangely comforting. The council recessed to consider a decision. While they deliberated, the station itself reacted. Research teams adjusted their frameworks. Predictive systems were recalibrated. Some even began redesigning parts of the scanner, not to fix it, but to learn from its failure. Ilara was asked to meet with the scanner's original architects, beings whose minds had shaped the system centuries earlier. They spoke not as judges, but as learners. Our system assumes maturity is stability, one of them said. Your species suggests maturity may be flexibility, Ilara nodded. We don't stop growing just because something works. They asked her about human education, about how children were taught to solve problems. She explained that humans encouraged questions, even uncomfortable ones. That mistakes were corrected but not punished into silence. Failure is information, she said, not shame. The architects exchanged thoughtful signals. Later, another evaluation was proposed, but this one was different. No simulation, no challenge, just observation. Humans were invited to participate in daily station life, not as guests, as contributors. Engineers worked alongside human technicians. Medics observed human triage methods. Diplomats watched human negotiators handle disagreements. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the point. Humans adjusted to unfamiliar environments with ease. They asked questions. They listened. They adapted their behavior without losing their identity. They did not insist on doing things the human way. They found ways that worked for everyone. Slowly, resistance faded, not because humans proved superior, because they proved compatible. The council reconvened. This time the debate was shorter. The question was no longer whether humanity could be ranked. It was whether ranking itself still made sense. A proposal was put forward. Radical, unprecedented. Humanity would not receive a numeric position. Instead, the classification system would be expanded. A new category, open-ended adaptation. Some opposed it. Categories existed to simplify reality. This did the opposite. Others supported it, arguing that ignoring complexity had always been the greater risk. Ilara was not consulted this time. She watched from her seat as the galaxy argued about her species. She felt a strange mix of distance and connection. Pride did not rise in her chest. Responsibility did. The vote was taken. The motion passed. The scanner would be updated, not to classify humanity fully, but to acknowledge what it could not yet measure. The words Unclassified Apex would remain, not as a title but as a marker of transition. After the session ended, Alara walked through the station one last time. The stares had changed. They were no longer searching or suspicious. They were thoughtful. A delegate stopped her briefly. "Your species has changed how we define progress," they said. Alara shook her head gently. "We didn't mean to. That may be why it matters." She reached the docking corridor where human ships waited. The noise of the station faded behind her. She felt relief. She was ready to go home. Behind her, the scanner completed its update. New parameters were added. New models prepared. The system did not declare completion. It flagged itself as ongoing. As Alara boarded her transport, she looked back once not at the scanner but at the stars beyond the station. She thought about how many unknowns waited out there, how many failures, how many chances to try again. That was enough. The galaxy had not crowned humanity. It had accepted that some things could not be finished. And in that acceptance, everything began to change. The human transport moved away from the Grand Forum station slowly, its engines humming with a steady, familiar rhythm. Alara Voss stood near a small viewport, watching the massive structure grow smaller against the field of stars. She felt lighter than she had in days, yet something inside her remained awake, alert, as if part of her had been left behind. The station did not feel finished with humanity, and humanity, she knew, was not finished with the galaxy. Inside the forum, the final updates to the scanner were complete. The system no longer searched for a highest rank. Instead, it tracked patterns of change, response, and growth over time. Where there had once been straight lines and fixed peaks, there were now branching paths. The archivists gathered to review the first full report under the new framework. The words Unclassified Apex remained, but beneath them was something new. A note written not in code but in translated language meant to be read and understood. Potential exceeds projection. Outcome dependent on context. Observation ongoing. For a machine designed to conclude, this was as close as it could come to humility. Across the station, conversations shifted. Species that once defined themselves by rank began asking different questions. How quickly could they adapt? How well could they recover? How much uncertainty could they endure without collapsing? Humanity had not given the galaxy answers. They had given it better questions. Alara's ship entered jump space and the stars stretched into light. She took a seat and closed her eyes. For the first time since the scanner activated, she allowed herself to feel tired. Not drained, but complete, like a long task finally set down. She thought about Earth, about cities that grew and changed, about people who argued, failed, rebuilt, and tried again. About how ordinary it all felt, how none of it seemed worthy of galactic attention, and yet here they were. Back on the station, a delegation from a long-isolated species requested human advisors, not to lead them, to listen. They had encountered an unexpected ecological shift and did not know how to proceed. The council approved the request without hesitation. This became common. Humans were invited not as rulers, but as partners in uncertainty. They were asked to help not because they had perfect solutions, but because they were comfortable without them. A human engineer suggested temporary fixes instead of permanent overhauls. A human medic prioritized adaptability over protocol. A human diplomat admitted uncertainty openly, and trust followed. None of these actions were dramatic. That was their strength. Over time, the term apex began to change meaning. It no longer referred to dominance. It referred to survivability over long, unpredictable timelines. Species once proud of their perfection began re-examining their rigidity. Some resisted. Change was uncomfortable, but even resistance softened when faced with evidence. Civilizations that adopted adaptive frameworks saw improved resilience. Those that refused found themselves struggling when conditions shifted. The scanner recorded it all. It did not judge. It learned. On Earth, news of the classification spread slowly. There were celebrations in some places, debates in others. Many people shrugged and went back to their lives. Humanity had never been unified by a single identity. This was no different. Alara returned to her old job. She was asked to speak at events, to consult, to represent humanity officially. She declined most offers. She did not feel like a symbol. She felt like a person who happened to be present at the right moment. When asked why she refused recognition, she answered simply, "I didn't do anything special." And she meant it. Months passed, then years. Humanity's presence in the galaxy grew, not through conquest or command, but through quiet involvement. They joined research teams, trade networks, cultural exchanges. They adapted to alien customs while sharing their own. They learned as much as they taught. The scanner continued to update its models. Humanity's future remained impossible to pin down. Every attempt to predict a final state ended in divergence. The system flagged this not as an error but as a defining feature. One archivist summarized it best. "Humanity is not a destination," they said. "It is motion." At a later council session, a young delegate asked why the words "unclassified apex" were never removed. By now, humanity had proven itself cooperative and stable. The answer came from an elder archivist. "Because classification implies completion," they said, "and humans are never complete." Far away, Alara stood on a balcony on Earth, watching the sun set behind a skyline that had changed even since her return. New buildings rose where old ones fell. People moved, adapted, argued, and laughed. She received a message from the forum, a simple update. The scanner was still observing. She smiled softly and closed the message. That was fine. Humans did not need to be understood all at once. They did not need a final label. They only needed time, challenges, and the freedom to respond. The galaxy had expected an apex to stand above all others. Instead, it found a species that moved forward without needing to stand still. And in the quiet space between stars, the scanner recorded one final note, not as a rank, but as a truth. Humanity did not reach the top. Humanity changed what the top meant, and the observation continued.